Hi, this is Miss Lancaster. We are moving into chapter 13, which is the health chapter. So we're looking at social problems in relationship to health. So when we talk about this, it really has to do with health, illness, and disease, and how the social institutions related to our society shape that. I want to start off, though, with kind of getting you thinking about what is healthy and what is sick. And sometimes what we consider to be healthy, what we consider to be sick, may not always necessarily be the same thing. We have these ideas of health and wealth, health and sickness. I'm going to start us off with actually watching a video. I want to share a video with you just to get you kind of thinking at first, and then we'll come back and I'll talk just a little bit. Get into this video. And here we go. Okay, so I share that video often because a lot of times people don't really think about illness through a sociological lens, because we think about it being a personal issue, which it is, but it is also a social issue. And I just want to kind of get us to kind of think about illness and sickness from a sociological perspective. I like what she has in that video about, is it hidden or is it invisible or well hidden? And that's the thing. There are a lot of illnesses, there are a lot of diseases, there are a lot of sicknesses that may not necessarily be visible to the individuals who are around those individuals who are actually sick. I will be honest, 9-10 years ago, if I were teaching this class, I likely would not be covering the health chapter. But when my son Samuel, who is now 8 years old, was 4 months old, he became very, very sick, very, very fast. And it turns out that he has an ultra rare disease called atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. And it brought me into the reality that anything could happen at any time with somebody who is sick, and that I was blessed to have excellent health insurance that was able to help me cover the expenses. When I got the explanation of benefits that showed how much my insurance paid, it was also a reminder of how there are many, many individuals in our society who would not ever be able to pay those bills, and they don't have the insurance. It's a good possibility that their child would not get the help that they need. Okay, my son is an individual who looks extremely healthy. He lives a normal life for the most part. Every 4 weeks we go to the hospital. It's every 8 weeks for an infusion, every other 4 weeks to get his port flushed because he has a port in his chest. You look at this child, you would never know that he has anything wrong with him. But technically, he is considered a medically fragile child, has to be, in order to be allowed to miss as much school as he misses. His infusions used to be every other week. His medication has changed, so it's not the same. But when people look at him, they would have never ever known that he was ever sick, that he has an illness, he has a rare disease. Okay, so I'm using these here to kind of give us this idea of what is sickness, what is illness, what is disease, and how does it impact our everyday lives. We really have to kind of think about how society defines health, how society defines illness. Your book talks about drapetomania, and that was an illness, right? That your book talks about. It was a real diagnosis by medical professionals. What was the diagnosis? It was the diagnosis of a slave who actually wanted to run away from his master. Okay, when we step back and we think about this, was it an illness? Or was it just something that could potentially have been natural that individuals would want to do? When we talk about some other illnesses or medical conditions, pregnancy is a medical condition. It's 100% natural, right? We have to really kind of step back and think about what is disease, what is illness, and that's what this whole chapter is about. When we talk about these events, when we talk about physical factors, when we talk about everything that creates what is considered healthy and what is considered not healthy, we have to kind of step back and take a look at the taken for granted way thinking about sickness and illness. Okay, sickness, disease. This is what we refer to as the medical model. Okay, some sociologists would actually even kind of talk about how we really discuss various aspects of health and wellness as a form of social control. Okay? In our book, you will be looking at a lot of different things. I've got a whole bunch of different videos for you to watch this week. It does seem like there's a lot to watch, but a lot of those videos, especially the crash course, really kind of cover things that I would be covering if I were to be lecturing. So rather than me lecturing, you can watch her video, kind of get her videos and get a glimpse of these. We have to kind of really step back and think about our society is what we would refer to as a medicalized society. I have another image that I like to kind of show you about this. Right here, this is an image of medicalization, right? We see commercials all the time trying to teach us what medicine we should want to use, right? This one is actually talking about it. At last there's a cure, right? But this guy didn't even recognize that something was a disease. We have to kind of really step back, think about that. There are sometimes there are illnesses that we don't even know exist, right? Until somebody tells us about them. Like your book will talk about ADD and HD and these increases, and some of the videos that I'm sharing also do. So the increases in those diagnoses. A lot of this has to do with changing a society in the acceptance of them and then defining them, right? Just like we say about drapetomania was an illness. It was a diagnosed illness that is no longer a diagnosed illness, right? Homosexuality at one point was considered a mental health issue. It is not anymore, right? We have to step back and think about how society defines illness. Now, there are some false assumptions about health that I really want to make sure that you understand in this chapter. We as our society oftentimes will kind of think about how illness is a result of bad genetics or about our own social conditions, right? If we live a bad lifestyle, right? If we live an unhealthy lifestyle, then we are determined to be sick. If genetics, it's just our genetics that it's natural. Some of us may be predisposed genetically to have an issue. My son's illness is a genetic disorder. However, Something socially triggered it. Something in his environment triggered his illness. So when we talk about these things, genetics and illness, these are the two flawed assumptions. Genetics explain illness and disease to the exclusion of social factors. And the second is people have control over the factors that make them ill. Those sound really, really good, right? They sound really true. But thinking about it from a sociological standpoint, we have to step back and consider a bit more. Sociologists will analyze illness by social factors, not just genetics, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, age, gender. All help us to better understand the broader patterns of social inequality, how those broader patterns of social inequality can relate and determine health and wellness, right? There have been lots of different research done in relationship to this, but some of the most beneficial in truly understanding how it's not just genetics is to follow twins, right? If twins are genetically the same individuals, right? But one lives a lifestyle of a higher class individual and one lives the lifestyle of a lower class individual, one has a better chance or a greater chance of of becoming ill, right? Of some of our major illnesses such as heart disease and stroke, right? Morbidity and mortality are deeply related to health inequalities. They're not necessarily genetic. The genetic explanation systematically excludes all the sociological explanations and deflects our attention from the ways in which our social life shapes our experiences in disease. So let's go back to those two flawed assumptions. The first one says that genetics explains disease to the exclusion of social factors. It explains disease, and genetics explain disease. Yes and no, right? Yes and no. When it doesn't take into social factors, it misses a lot. Okay? But then that relates to the second flawed assumption, that people have control over the factors that make them ill. Yes and no. Okay? Step back and think about everything we have learned so far. I can choose to eat healthy. I can exercise. I can do those things that may make a difference in my health and wellness. However, sometimes my social factors might inhibit those abilities. Okay? We can adopt a healthy lifestyle, a lifestyle that can either make us sick or can make us healthy. However, those conditions may not be as readily available to some than others. If I work in an environment that puts me more at risk, I can live a healthy lifestyle, but my job might not be able to, right? Individual lifestyles are patterned, right? Our own individual lifestyles are patterned. Our social classes are patterned, right? The stratification system will determine, like when we come down to some of the things that we've learned in other chapters, when we look at income inequality and even the availability to afford food, right? Certain foods are going to help us live a healthier lifestyle than others. If it comes down to keeping my home, right, paying my mortgage or paying my rent or buying fresh fruits and vegetables instead of ramen noodles, I'm going to keep my home and then potentially figure out how I'm going to eat, because it's that shelter piece, right? We have to step back and really consider the social conditions, okay? Now, I'm not giving a full lecture here. I'm just trying to give you some ideas to kind of think about it. Disease is not necessarily an individual problem, right? Disease is not necessarily an individual problem. It's not necessarily a problem of the body or the biology. It's not necessarily the genetics. It can be the genetics, the social factors that can play a part in it. Okay? When we look at who tends to get sick, we can see patterns. I want you really paying attention to the social patterns, the status groups that shape and influence who gets sick and who does not. Our society talks about, our text talks about how the range in inequality between between wealthy and poor, there are determinations in how long you will live, right? The wealthier you are, the longer you live. The poorer you are, the shorter your life. Now, that doesn't mean that all poor people die young, and it doesn't mean that all wealthy people die old, right? But there are clear patterns. Some of this has to do with access to healthcare. Some of it has to do with access to food, the type of jobs that we live, and the environments in which we live in. I need you to take a look at all of this. The book will also talk about the gender differences. Women tend to be considered sick more often. However, they live longer than men. So what could be the reasons for that? I want you to really kind of step back and think about that. The book talks about the U.S. healthcare system and the stakeholders that are involved in that. Review that. Make sure that you understand it. The theories. Conflict theory, functionalism, and symbolic interactionism are 3 broad theories. Again, I've shared videos in relationship to this. Review them. Let me know if you have questions. It also talks about Bordeaux and the social and cultural capital theory. We've seen that one before, but it's basically talking about how this is really kind of a, I guess, meso level aspect of symbolic interactionism. It's that mid-range type of theory. It's kind of postmodernistic, but basically talking about how our networks of individuals and the culture that we learn from them will shape what we consider to be healthy, what we consider to not be healthy, how balanced our lives are. That relates to social capital theory. And then, of course, there is the fundamental cause theory. Please read through all of these theories, read through the chapter, watch all of the videos. Yes, there's a lot of them. It could be a little bit time consuming, but I think that every single one of them will be helpful for you. Issues and controversy is about immunizations. So make sure that you have that done by Sunday. Okay, discussion board, due by Tuesday. However, if you post by Friday, then you are guaranteed a comment by me if no one else has responded. Your quiz will be due by Tuesday. We only have one more chapter after this. This is our next to last chapter. Our next chapter will be on, I think it's terrorism, I believe. I'm not positive on that. I could be wrong. But I'm looking forward to seeing your questions, and hope that you enjoy this chapter. Have a great day.